So welcome. So you talked about in your third year you studied in Australia, and for the
Yeah,
rest of the years you studied in the UK.
yeah, that's right.
So could you give us a rundown? We'll start first with the people
hmm
of what it was like to study in Australia versus the UK.
Yeah, I think in terms of the people in Australia, they definitely were friendly. They were. Uh,
Friendlier.
I think they seemed friendlier, but I mean that could be because the weather's always nice there. So, you know, I guess people are more outgoing in that sort of scenario. But overall, yeah, I mean, it wasn't too difficult to make friends. When I went there, I didn't know anyone in my course or anyone in Sydney at all. So I was sort of going there, pretty much, solo. I knew a few people that were going from Sheffield to study there, but I didn't know them before the study abroad even happened. So yeah, it was sort of like getting dropped in there and having to make friends and meet new people. Um, yeah.
And if we now go to the university, could you
Mhm.
compare what it's like studying at obviously Sheffield versus Sydney?
Yeah, I think Sydney was much better than Sheffield. So I studied at UNSW, to be specific, and there they seemed to be they had a different structure to Sheffield in terms of how the year was performed. So they had a setup called trimesters, where they have three terms in essence, and each term was about 10 weeks long, which is strange because over there they just converted to that system. So a lot of them hated it, but I thought it was pretty cool,
Mm.
because it sort of like bunched up the modules and then you just do the exam straight away. The other difference I noticed was like, they have their exams at the end of their term, not after the term break. So
Oh, so at
for
the end of each term.
Yeah, so
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 instead
they
of a
do
full year, you do three exams broken into the year instead of all the exams at the end of the year.
that. And also, like for example, here in Sheffield, we do our semester one course, then we have Christmas break, and then we do the exams after the Christmas break. But in Australia, they do the course, do the exams, then have the break. So the break, this is not a revision break; it's a genuine holiday.
Oh, so like right in, you basically go right. So they do everything bunched up. And then, like you said, a genuine holiday instead of having to like a study week
Yeah, yeah,
or you just go, you have your test and your freedom basically for a couple
yeah,
of for a
yeah.
week or
That
two.
that's yeah, that's how they do
Okay.
it. And I preferred that so much because you can do much more in the holiday than worry about exams.
You talked about the weather.
Mhm.
Could you compare the weather? What was the weather like in Australia versus the
Yeah,
UK?
so the weather, I mean, it was hot because I was there between what, like September to April. I had to come back early because of COVID, but I was supposed to be there until August. But the weather whilst I was there was like super hot because that's their summer. Because over their Christmas break, I guess that's the summer period. So the weather was like ranging between 20 on the cooler days to like 40 degrees almost on the hot days. So it was pretty, intense. They had a lot of forest fires, actually. That was quite a big thing when I was there. I know now they've been inundated with floods, so I guess they have some wacky weather. Yeah.
If we now talk about the area of the around the university,
hmm
obviously in the original video we made, you talked about Sheffield being kind of small and the access to things wasn't as much. What about in Australia?
Yeah. In Australia, it was great because the uni was pretty much, quite close to the city center, like the central business district of Sydney. And I was involved in a program in UNSW, which was to help develop a new sort of technology to help the uni. And they had workshops and stuff with other companies that were in Sydney itself. So yeah, we had companies coming in to do workshops from Microsoft, IBM, a lot of the large, tech, yeah, whatever firms like that. And we were able to actually go to their offices and so on to do some of the workshops and talk to people in charge of quite, good level of what do you call it, like high level of seniority.
Mm.
So it's like one of the CEOs for something in IBM gave us a workshop on like AI. So definitely, I'd say the connections are great in Sydney. And I personally made a lot of friends with a lot of startup founders in the city,
Okay.
because I got introduced to a whole group of them through a friend that I met in the same program whilst at uni.
What one defining thing would you say Sydney does better than the UK?
Um,
And this is just in general, like just being there in
yeah,
general. It could be anything. What thing do you think the UK just can't beat them at?
that's a tough one. Um, it's tricky because I think the way I would answer it is the city, but the issue is because I've never lived in
Sheffield.
London. London's probably
Okay.
like the equivalent of Sydney. So
Okay.
I think
While you were
overall,
there, just from while you were there.
yeah, okay. So whilst I was there, I think the stuff you can do in Sydney, like the variety of activities you can do, because you have your whole nightlife stuff in Sydney, but you have a lot of other things you can do. So obviously you can go to the cinema and stuff like that, but then you have so much more things you can add on to that, which is surfing, hiking. There's just pretty much like infinite amount of things you can do in Sydney because it has such a unique position in the country where so much stuff is available for you to do. And I think also, especially with Sydney, the transport's pretty good, so you can get anywhere in the city pretty easily.
And what would you say for the UK is one defining thing that Sydney can't beat?
Again, I think it's just the
The area.
geographic location. Yeah,
Okay.
because the UK is just center of a lot of like countries, whereas Sydney's just isolated in the middle of nowhere. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's fine. Is there anything else you think students need to know about studying? Obviously, if they would like to study abroad, what it was like studying going from the UK to Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend it. Like, I think it helped me develop as a person because you sort of have to come out of your own friendship group here in the UK and be immersed in amongst like a different culture, if you will. Even though they still speak English in Australia, it's just like the way that they, I guess,
Interact.
interact, yeah, is different, but not too dissimilar to the UK. And it's not difficult to make friends and so on, I'd say. So I definitely say it's worth going to study in a different country because you just get the experience of being like more independent than usual because you can't really pick up the phone, call anyone back at home because it'll be like in the middle of the night. So yeah, you just have to deal with stuff yourself and yeah, live your life in a completely different way.
Last question.
Hmm.
What difficulties did you have when trying to sort out your third year in Australia? And what difficulties could other students potentially face?
Yeah, I think one of the difficulties probably that students could face is finding accommodation, because it's quite expensive to live in Sydney. So because I was fortunate enough to be able to afford some more expensive accommodation, I could like book the accommodation from home, like reliably because it was through a proper student accommodation in Australia. But you can get cheaper accommodation. The risk is like you don't know who the person offering that accommodation is, so you could get scammed out of your money. So if you are cash strapped, it can be harder for finding accommodation. And I know other people who went to Australia, they stayed in a hostel for like a first week and then tried to find their accommodation whilst they were there. So I think that's probably the hardest part is if you have the money to spend on accommodation, then I'd say it's safer and more convenient to choose the expensive like company sort of scenario, which is like a high-rise flat. Um, but otherwise, yeah, it can be quite difficult, but not impossible.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.